Oh yeah. My neck, my back, my neck and my back. I won $150,000. I'm suing, but we can settle out of court right now for $20. Eddie Hearn said he finna sue the WBC if Deontay the Bronze Bomber Wilder doesn't fight his fighter, Dillian White. What up, Fight World? I'm suing for $150,000. Man, it is going from sugar to shit. Eddie Hearn, it said, man, Eddie said lemons who's sitting at home in their Transformer PJs. I don't know what this is. But anyway, Eddie Hearn just did an interview and it reeks of desperation. He just did an interview and he said he's going to sue the WBC if they allow for Wilder versus Tyson Fury 2 to commence. I'm gonna give my thoughts. He says his fighter has been owed the WBC, mandatory. Dillian White supposed to get the shot. So if they allow for that fight, he's suing. So, Eddie Hearn, he pulled into Tekashi 6ix9ine. He trying to go to them boys. He's trying to snitch. He's trying to, get the WBC in trouble or take them to court. I think this is a terrible move. I think it reeks of desperation for many reasons. Let's break this down. I just covered Wilder's last fight, May 18th, a couple of days after my dad's birthday. Shout out to all the Tauruses. And I was at the fight, viral knockout from Wilder, and the WBC appointed and ordered Dominic Breazeale as the number one mandatory. This is not anything new where they've had two people that were number one guys, like a silver champion, and then another guy who they're saying and call for the mandatory. It happened in the welterweight division. It is confusing. I give them that. It is confusing because at one point they had Danny Garcia, the number one mandatory, and they had Amir Khan at the number one mandatory. Then there's another point where they had Sean Porter, who had fought eliminators with Adrian Granados, and then Sean Porter had a Berto eliminator to get this number one spot. But then they said Danny Garcia. But then when Keith Thurman, he actually relinquished the WBC title because he was Derrick Rose of boxing or whatever, MIA, and he couldn't defend. Then that rectified the situation, and they made Danny Garcia versus Sean Porter to establish who deserves the belt, right? So no mandatory needed. So I get it. It is confusing when they have more than one mandatory or two guys that are slated at number one. But now you have Eddie Hearn threatening legal action against the WBC, which I'll talk more about that. And I just think it's just wrong on so many levels. For example, Wilder just fought who the WBC told him was his mandatory, May 18th. Usually you're good for about a year, until you're up for, you're called to fight a mandatory. Wilder has one belt. It's not like he has multiple belts and multiple mandatory. One belt. He's been good with the WBC. He's been in good with the WBC. They said, this is the guy that we're ordering you to fight as your mandatory. Before that, he fought Bermane Stiverne 2. It's supposed to be Luis Ortiz. They're going to pay Ortiz, or they're going to pay Stiverne 2 step-aside money. He was going to fight an eliminator with Eric Molina. But then Luis Ortiz failed a drug test with hypertension. And as a result, they said, Luis Ortiz is out. We got to talk to him and clarify his situation. We need to fill this date. Stiverne, you're up. No step-aside money needed. Wilder knocked him out. Mandatory. Taken care of. Knocked him out in the first round. Knocked Breazeale out, just last May 18th. And that's who they said was his mandatory. So Eddie Hearn coming from behind, it reeks of desperation. He's saying he's going to sue. He's going to threaten legal action if Dillian White does not fight next for the title, or presumably after the Luis Ortiz fight. It just makes no sense. If you guys know anything about courts in general, legal processes take time. I remember All Star Boxing sued, that's Canelo's promoter out of Mexico, who brought him into the States and kind of, they said, introduced him to Golden Boy, and Golden Boy stole him and then took off, and Canelo blew up with them. They were in courts for years. They still have to go back to court, I think, because, the promoter All-Star Boxing won, and then Canelo's supposed to be paying them money out, and then they're trying to appeal it. These processes take long. So either way, Dillian Whyte probably, you have to have any type of hearing or court proceeding takes time. You have to set a court date or a hearing date. Both people have to build their case, present, then they have to deliberate, those types of things. So just off of the common sense, that doesn't do anything for your fighter immediately. Two, just from a practicality point of view, Eddie Hearn has been coming up short with the WBC in recent memory. Excuse me 1 second. Recent memory. Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte thinks he's the man. He's the guy that, is supposed to be fighting Deontay Wilder, right? And the WBC said no. And then they picked Dominic Breazeale. Here's another example. Dillian Whyte, after that, they signed Devin Haney. They said, oh, welcome to the team, Devin Haney. You're now a Matchroom fighter. It was discussed. There's interviews with Devin Haney right before he signed a Matchroom, said he's definitely getting a title shot. He was the number 2 guy with the WBC, and Luke Campbell was the number 1 rated guy. So everybody was under the impression that Devin Haney and Luke Campbell, the 1 and 2 guys, would battle for the belt, the vacant belt, because Mikey Garcia announced that he's not competing at lightweight because he just moved up to welterweight and got stopped, or not stopped, but he lost, in a big way to Errol Spence, right? So that belt freed up. Mikey's not immediately going back to lightweight. He might not ever go back to lightweight. Just depends on the options and, how he feels at 140, 147. And he's about to fight an exhibition with Eric Morales, So that freed up Mikey's belt. Matchroom thought they were going to get the fight for their newfound fighter. They promised him that. And now they're like, oh, Devin Haney's a kid. He's not going to get it. He's eventually going to get a title shot. But they came up short. They didn't get it over the line. Eddie Hearn, the most dangerous thing in this new social media age is a camera and a microphone. And he keeps falling victim to the same thing. He just keeps doing interviews and keeps saying stuff. Just conventional wisdom. I'm not a part of like this the business side and stuff. I just want to see good fights and all that. But just common sense. You keep speaking out on the WBC and then you want things to go in your favor. You spoke out in the Devin Haney. Oh, how could they do this? Then you've been talking about suing the WBC for the Dillian Whyte stuff. It's just a lot of talking. I don't see how that's going to, strengthen your relationship with the WBC. So that's one thing. So you have Wilder, who just fought, who the WBC told him to fight and said that is satisfying your mandatory May 18th of this year. So he should be good for a year. They're talking about Wilder fighting Luis Ortiz, sometime in the second half of this year, the fall or something, and then fighting Tyson Fury in January, February, March. So how is Eddie Hearn going to strong arm the WBC and get Dillian Whyte to intercept and cock block a fight between Wilder and Fury? Please let me know that. That's why it doesn't seem smart. Doesn't seem like a smart plan. And usually when you have your hands tied behind your back and you're desperate, you don't think things through. Now, to make that more fucked up, Eddie Hearn just did a recent interview for the Maurice Hooker Jose Ramirez fight card, and he says he's been getting strong arm and basically X'd out, and promoters are basically outsmarting him. Al Heyman and Bob Arum outsmarting him, and he came in a little bit too naive and gung-ho to the American market. Listen.
The stable. Timing came along, DAZN wanted to launch in the States, and it was great. I was probably a little bit naive in that I was like, I'm going to come to US, I'm going to smash everybody up, I'm going to take over, we've got this pot of money, blah, blah, blah. Probably underestimated, the skills of the other guys who wanted to hold on so tight. They blocked me, they tried to stop me, and it was tough. It was a real tough start where I was getting sort of turned down from fighters thinking, how can you turn down this deal? They didn't know enough about me. They didn't know enough about DAZN. Everyone was telling them it wouldn't work. Everyone was telling them the money wasn't real.
So he just you heard from the horse's mouth, he just admitted he came in too pompous, like I've been telling you, new media, and too arrogant, saying, I'm going to take over the game, and kept talking about what he was going to do rather than do it. Oh, I'm going to put all these other American promoters out of business. They're going to hate me. And he had that little, shit don't stink, chagrin, right? And then now he's admitting, coming to the realization that, oh, it was a tough start. Fighters were being told not to sign to me. And I thought we had all this money, and I came in naive. I underestimated basically Bob Arum. Basically, I underestimated Al Heyman, their power, and they were blocking me, and fighters weren't turning to me. And then now, on top of that, Eddie Hearn continues to keep talking and being this mouthpiece in front of the camera. And now he's threatening legal action against the WBC. I don't see how that's advantageous. I can go a little bit deeper. The fight you see on the screen is a tough fight. Oscar Rivas beat Andy Ruiz Jr. in the amateurs. As you guys know, Eddie Hearn's other cash cow, Anthony Joshua, just took a loss to Andy Ruiz. So we know now, even though I knew before and did the 7 reasons and picked Andy Ruiz, but we now know, the world knows, that Andy Ruiz is a good fighter. The man on the screen who Dillian Whyte is about to fight beat Andy Ruiz in the amateurs. Now, amateurs, pros, pro, but it shows you he has experience because he's able to beat a good fighter in Andy Ruiz. That's not a give me fight for Dillian Whyte. So once again, if Dillian Whyte looks sloppy, if he gets dropped, if he loses, Eddie Hearn worsened the situation, especially if Oscar Rivas beats Dillian Whyte, because Oscar Rivas is a top-ranked fighter. So he's going to go back to his network. I don't know about if they have a rematch clause. Maybe they do. But either way, he goes back to top-ranked fight, with a scalp. Now, they're going to maybe rematch or something like that if there's a rematch clause in there. And Eddie Hearn has already put out and made it a public issue that he's planning, if Wilder tries to fight Tyson Fury, which Wilder still has to get past his next publicly scheduled fight with it, which is Luis Ortiz. So Tyson Fury, they won't even confirm it. This is how you know it's desperation. Tyson Fury's side is not even confirming it because they said, we got to get past Tom Schwartz. He has to fight Luis Ortiz. So they're not even confirming, but it shows the worry and the fear with Eddie Hearn because he's losing power and he knows that. So there's a lot up for the Wilder Fury. There's a lot that has to happen for that to happen. Wilder has to get past Luis Ortiz. Tyson Fury got to get past not only Tom Schwartz, but presumably he said he wants to fight 3 times this year. So he's probably going to have 2 more fights, 1 or 2 more fights, tune-up style fights before that. And Eddie Hearn's already talking about suing. So anyway, what if Dillian Whyte loses to Oscar Rivas? Now he's not even going to be the mandatory, or he's not going to be the number 1 guy. And here you are with this petty threat to the WBC. He better pray that Dillian Whyte looks good in this fight. Dillian Whyte, like him, he's a good fighter, but Eddie Hearn being this mouthpiece and all in the video, come to death row, it's not looking good because he just keeps saying stuff like, oh, I'm a sue. And, speaking of Tyson Fury, I just seen his picture. Tyson Fury, right? They thought Eddie Hearn is being X'd out of the America. That's just the best way to put it. Dillian Whyte versus Tyson Fury, that was something that was kind of ordered or came up. So Eddie Hearn probably got happy, like, oh, that's a big fight. That's a big fight to be a part of. And then now it's coming out that Al Heyman and Top Rank are willing to work together. They're willing to work together to make Wilder Fury 2. That's what he's fearful of, because he thought one of his fighters, presumably Dillian Whyte, might fight him. You know what I'm saying? He thought Dillian Whyte might fight against Tyson Fury for some kind of diamond belt they were talking about. But now he's realizing that it's probably going to be Wilder if he gets past Luis Ortiz, which he probably thinks he will get past him. Man, this is coming down. This is all coming down. And then this goes without saying, his big cash cow just lost. That was what they were banking on. Joshua was to Matchroom what Canelo is to Golden Boy. He's the biggest star, the biggest earner, and he just took a horrible loss that they didn't anticipate. This is a bad sign for Eddie Hearn. All this American takeover. You had an American takeover in your card. All of your stars look vulnerable and or lost, or it's perceived they lost, or they actually physically lost. Facts. Tommy Coyle lost to Chris Algieri via stoppage. Katie Taylor, the world thinks she lost. I could go to any Katie Taylor. See, this new media shit is real. I told you. I told you. Katie Taylor. I'll go to her own page and we'll see what people say about her fight. You know. Layla Ali. Brilliant. Give a rematch you didn't win. Look, in seconds. Give a rematch you didn't win the match. Delphine kicked your ass hard. Look, point proven. She's celebrating in Ireland because she's back at home. She lost that fight. Look, you clearly lost. So, again, you can, ego's lying, you're just hating. You can say all that, go to her own page, and then you see what the world feels about that performance. That's why she herself, Katie Taylor, said, I want to rematch Delphine Pearson's because I wasn't satisfied with my performance. Which, when people say that, it tells you don't hear Keith Thurman beat Danny Garcia or Sean Porter and say, oh, I need the rematch because I want to, I'm not satisfied. He doesn't really say stuff like that because he knew he won the fight, or that's what he feels he won. It's looking bad for Eddie Hearn, threatening to sue the WBC. Dillian White has to come through the Oscar Rivas fight. And then I don't know what DAZN's doing because they have Eddie Hearn and he's continually doing this, continually talking and kind of putting his foot in his mouth and kind of getting backed out by American promoters and American advisors and stuff. And DAZN doesn't have the stable. Joshua just lost, big loss. The perception that Josh Kelly could have lost, or Katie Taylor, she's undisputed, but a lot of people feel she didn't earn that. She didn't look good. She lost even the last round, with championship rounds, and it's just not looking good. And Eddie Hearn continues to make the same mistakes, talking about suing. So you're probably pissing off the WBC even more. You lost your cash cow. You're losing power with the Joshua situation. Ruiz, you're forcing an immediate rematch. That's what he just said. So that's a huge, it's a dangerous fight to put him in there. So it's like Eddie Hearn's in a lot of situations that are all do or die. Joshua, if he loses again, everybody is saying it, from Bob Arum to Adam Smith to Eddie Hearn himself, that if Joshua loses again to Andy Ruiz, it's going to prove it's not a fluke. Just like Isaac Dogbe versus Navarrete, or Juanma Lopez versus Salido. It's going to prove it's not a fluke and there was no error, and that's going to hurt you even worse, and it's going to hurt Joshua's brand even worse. Then you have fights like this, good for boxing fans, Hooker and Ramirez, but Ramirez is a top-ranked fighter, as you guys see. So if Ramirez wins, then he takes your champion's belt, right? And then he goes back to top rank as a champion, unified. Same thing with the Dillian White fight. He's in a dangerous fight. I just told you his opponent beat Andy Ruiz and Kubrat Pulev as an amateur. So Joshua's in a do or die rematch with Andy Ruiz, who has all the confidence in the world, and Joshua looked like you see on the screen. Dillian White's in a tough fight. Hooker's in a tough fight with Jose Ramirez. And the thing with Dillian White and Hooker's fights, they're on fights that are dangerous. And just like the Joshua Ruiz, they're not hometown fighters. So it's not like Joshua lost to Michael Hunter, Usyk, or Philip Ergovich, because those guys are signed and aligned with DAZN and or Matchroom. You lost to an outsider, an Al Heyman fighter, Andy Ruiz. If Dillian White loses to Oscar Rivas, that's a top-ranked fighter. If Hooker loses to Jose Ramirez, that's a top-ranked fighter. So their top rank is and Al Heyman, they put him in some. They put in Eddie. Look, this is Tommy Coyle getting stopped in the American Takeover card. Gerald Miller, we don't know how he's gonna come back. We don't even know if he's signed to DAZN anymore. When he can come back, with the perception, because he's failed drug tests. So it's like Matchroom, like they got to do something. And then on top of that, Eddie Hearn keeps doing these interviews saying he's gonna sue. It reeks of desperation. How are you going to sue and win? And how long is that process going to take to sue somebody? And how are you going to sue when Wilder was ordered to fight Dominic Breazeale? Whether you like it or not, whether you thought it was right or not, they said that was his mandatory. And they have paperwork and a paper trail. So how are you going to sue when he just fought his mandatory? And he's talking about fighting Tyson Fury. He's being left out. Eddie Hearn came in boastful, American Takeover, and him and Joshua, that was his cash cow. They didn't anticipate him losing, and now they're having to pick up the pieces. They didn't think this would be a reality, and now it's all coming crashing down. Now they're like, damn, AJ's profile's hurt. You know, they signed Joseph Parker, who's solid, but he's not a champion. He lost to AJ, who just lost. He lost to Dillian White, who's in a tough fight with Oscar Rivas. I mean, this is just crazy. This is crazy. And then on top of it, Eddie Hearn, in my opinion, is making it worse because he's getting caught up in lies and fibs, and he keeps further telling people his plans. And like, if you're going to sue someone, just sue him. Why are you talking about a year in advance? We have to see how Tyson Fury looks versus Tom Schwartz. We have to see if Wilder gets past, you know, his guy, Ortiz. We got to see if Dillian White gets past his guys. There's so much that needs to be determined before it even gets to next year who Wilder should be defending. Your fighter might not get past Oscar Rivas. You know, it's not out of the realm of possibilities, right? And he's already talking about suing somebody. That just shows you he's in dire straits. You got Maurice Hooker in a dangerous fight. You know, it's looking crazy. All of Eddie Hearn's fighters have either lost or they're in dangerous fights, period. Katie Taylor, if she rematches the girl that did that stylistic matchup is still a danger to Katie Taylor. Maurice Hooker's in a dangerous fight with Jose Ramirez. Oscar Rivas is a dangerous opponent for Dillian White. AJ rematching the guy that just beat him in New York, and they might have to come back to New York. The guy just knocked him down 4 times and now has confidence. That becomes a dangerous fight. And then on top of that, you have Eddie Hearn, who just keeps telling people and egging it on and telling people he's going to sue and stuff like that. It's not a good look. I don't see how that would strengthen your relationship with the WBC, you know. And Wilder and Andy Ruiz and Al Heyman and Bob Arum, they're probably just sitting back laughing. You're on tape admitting it's been hard for you to take over America like you thought. So, you know, this is hurting DAZN. This is hurting Rematch Room. You know, Barry Hearn got the slave room, slave trade comments. It's looking bad. It's looking real bad. I don't see how he's going to sue and win and be successful. It sounds like a rich person, somebody who is spoon-fed like Eddie Hearn, who is having a temper tantrum because they're not getting their way. Danny Jacobs just lost to Canelo. Bro, his people are being knocked off, and he's kind of being X'd out, and he's being put in a bad situation because Top Rank, they're sending good quality fighters over, but no disrespect to Jose Ramirez or Oscar Rivas. Top Rank, they're not Top Rank's #1 bread earners. I'm not saying they don't make money, because I know for a fact when Jose Ramirez fights out here, because he fights in NorCal, you know, he fights, you know, 3 hours from me where I live in Fresno. He does good seats and sells out the venue and shit. So I know Ramirez is an earner, but it's not as huge of a risk. Not like they're losing. It's like Terrence Crawford or Lomachenko losing. You know, that would be more devastating because they've really put a lot of money between those guys and built up their brand. AJ is their biggest star and just lost, and lost in that fashion. Even when Canelo lost to Mayweather, it was Mayweather, and he didn't get knocked down 4 times, and you know, he wasn't like visibly concussed and saying, hey, what did I get hit with and stuff. And I think Eddie Hearn is feeling the pressure, so that's why you're hearing this talk. But the talk is not good. You know, they got to strategize and really come up with something. Dillian White, if he loses, and Eddie Hearn's on record saying that he's going to sue the WBC, then good luck, you know, taking the loss and then having Dillian White, you know, move up the rankings to get back there. Is going to be an uphill battle because you're not even developing a rapport with these people, with the WBC. If anything, you're probably, you know, irritating them by threatening them. Let me know what you guys think of Eddie Hearn's desperate attempt saying he's going to sue if Wilder doesn't fight Dillian White. And the thing is, this all could have been avoided. Wilder could have fought and should have fought Anthony Joshua. And he kept referencing that Wilder needed to build up his UK fan base, and, you know, the Joshua Wilder fight needed more time to prepare, and 6 months is not enough. Now you don't have anything. Joshua has his own, he has Andy Ruiz problems. Dillian White didn't get the opportunity with either Joshua, or it's just looking bad, people. You know, he could have made Dillian White versus AJ 2 times before they signed on to fight Gerald Miller. He could have made the fight, right? And he didn't. He said, oh, we can't agree on money. Got greedy. They didn't want to just pay Dillian White, which at least even if he beat Joshua, it would have been a matchroom fighter instead of Andy Ruiz, who you didn't think could do it, that did it, and being an Al Heyman fighter going to the other side. So they could have fought to begin with before Gerald Miller. And I told you this from the beginning. This is why new media continues to win. Dillian Whyte had a better 2018 and was more deserving of the fight based on who he had to fight last year leading up to this year. He fought Lucas Brown, a former champion, knocked him out brutally on HBO. He had a pay-per-view in the UK against a former champion, Joseph Parker, dropped him 2 times, something AJ didn't do. Then he cleaned up the Derek Chisora 2 fight in December, which I thought Derek Chisora beat him the first time, and then he knocks him out. You give the fight to Gerald Miller, who beat Thomas Adamak, who was a cruiserweight, who was semi-retired, who Eric Molina knocked out a while ago, and he was like 40 years old, and then Bogdad Dinu, and then that's who you gave the fight to, because that's what you thought was the fight that you could sell and build. And then Gerald Miller, he created this whole, fell in the drug test, really fucked shit up, really fucked it up. And then you brought in Andy Ruiz thinking there's no way Joshua loses to him, and then the worst thing happens. The karma comes back, Ruiz beats him. Now you look crazy. So you had 2 times where before Dillian Whyte, before Gerald Miller was selected, Dillian Whyte could have fought AJ in a rematch, but they said he wanted too much money. Then Gerald Miller fails a drug test. You were looking for late minute opponents. You could have said, squash the Oscar Rivas fight for Dillian Whyte. I need Dillian Whyte to fill this Madison Square Garden date. But they didn't want Joshua to be in a tough fight and have to switch to a guy like that and lose, or potentially lose. But guess what? He still potentially lost. He still lost to the man you've seen on the screen. But the difference being, that's not your guy. You have no options on him. You can't sign him. That's an Al Heyman guy. Why would Al Heyman wait, let Andy Ruiz, Top Rank, abandon him? He signed him, put him on a card, gave him an opportunity. You guys gave him an opportunity. Then he wins. Why would Al Heyman give you this guy now? So now you have Andy Ruiz with all these Mexican following, all the Hispanic following, and he's just a likable guy in general. So a lot of people like him or fucking with him. Why would they give him to you now after he's already famous now? He went from 68,000 followers to almost 1 million in a week. Y'all made him a celebrity overnight versus the 2 chances you had to give Dillian Whyte this opportunity and you didn't. And then now you're regretting it because, like I said, there's a chance late switch. Maybe Dillian Whyte could have beat, because Dillian Whyte has improved since he lost to AJ the first time. And he already beat AJ. So he beat AJ in the amateurs. So as far as I'm concerned, they're 1-1. But they didn't want to risk that. But they put him in with someone they didn't think could beat AJ. And then he beat him anyway. So I would at least rather my guy, another one of my guys I work with, Dillian Whyte, beat AJ in America than Andy Ruiz, who I have no options on. They messed this up bad. And that's why you see he's threatening to sue, and it's just ugly. Let me know what you guys think. We working. So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button, and you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support. Boxing Ego, the future of boxing.